A very good morning to our excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Adra Khamis. I'm a climate change analyst at the Ministry of Climate Change and Environment, and I will be your host for today. It's given me immense pleasure to welcome you at the launch of the National Net Zero by 2050 pathway. Tackling climate change and climate crisis is a significant priority that every nation needs to address, and thus to ensure sustainable development. While we all know that there is no one solution that fits all, the global community has agreed that pursuing net zero is the right way and the right pathway towards a pragmatic solution. In addition to climate change mitigation, net zero also accelerates adaptation efforts and supports prevention of loss and damage. Last year, the UAE announced its net zero by 2050 strategic initiative, a major step in line with the Paris Agreement, which encourages countries to submit long-term emission reduction strategies and set ambitious climate targets. At the next step in our journey towards net zero, we are now introducing the National Net Zero by 2050 pathway, which was developed through a robust, whole-of-nation, all-inclusive approach. Ladies and gentlemen, I present the launch video of the National Net Zero Pathway by 2050.
Climate change is the single most critical threat to humanity, as it affects not only us, but also the food we eat, the water we drink, the places we live in, and even plants, animals, air, and soil. Environmental protection ranks high on the UAE's national agenda. Since the inception of the country in 1971, its wise leadership has placed the environment at the core of national development. We cherish our environment because it is an integral part of our country, our history, and our heritage. On land and in the sea, our forefathers lived and survived in this environment. They were able to do so only because they recognized the need to conserve it, to take from it only what they needed to live, and to preserve it for succeeding generations, said the late Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan, founding father of the UAE. The UAE has 49 protected areas spanning 15.5% of the country's territory. The country proactively works to enhance air quality and implement integrated waste management. The UAE was the first country in the GCC to sign the Paris Agreement. In 2021, the nation declared its intention to achieve net zero by 2050. The UAE is determined to walk the talk and has taken decisive measures to achieve this, including forming the UAE Climate Action Council and launching the National Dialogue for Climate Ambition. The UAE set up a dedicated team to design its long-term, low-carbon development strategy, comprising representatives of the government, municipalities, and youth. In this whole-of-nation effort, more than 30 stakeholders were consulted, and feedback from more than 400 individuals, including youth, women, and people of determination, was gathered. Today, we are proud to launch the National Net Zero 2050 pathway. The pathway is based on an absolute emission reduction target of 18% by 2030, 60% by 2040, and net zero by 2050. Pathway is projected to bring significant gains in terms of job creation, GDP growth, and air quality. Enablers of our strategy include renewables, energy efficiency, clean manufacturing, green mobility, carbon capture, utilization, and sequestration. We plan to submit our third NDC in line with the National Net Zero 2050 pathway in 2023. We will use technology, innovation, and R&D to advance our goals. We seek to bring everyone on board to build a more sustainable and climate-resilient future.
And now it's an honor to invite Her Excellency Mariam bint Mohammed Al Meheri, Minister of Climate Change and Environment, to deliver her opening remarks.
Wow, thank you so much. It's amazing to see so many faces, and I really feel like I'm among friends here. So thank you so much for being here with us today. It's been a journey, ladies and gentlemen. As my colleague said, we announced the Net Zero Strategic Initiative before COP26, being the first in the region to do so. I like to say the UAE is a bit of a trendsetter. And we heard back from a lot of stakeholders at COP26, okay, 2050 is so far away. How and what's going to happen in between now and 2050? So many of my colleagues, government representative, private sector, we all worked together in the past months to say, let's deliver at COP27 a pathway that shows interim targets for the hard-to-abate sectors. So we did a series of monthly meetings called the National Dialogue for Climate Ambition. And we sat with the stakeholders, we heard from them, what are the bottlenecks, how can we get their ambitions higher, what are the mature technologies that we can scale up, and with that, we made our pathway, and my colleague Isa will be talking about the details in that. But I'm so excited, and I really want to take the opportunity to thank each and every one of you. We worked so hard in the background doing calculations, analysis, stakeholder consultations, and sometimes even tough decisions. Can we do this? Can we do that? So this couldn't have been done without all your efforts. I know we also have our Minister of Youth here with us today. The youth were with us developing this pathway because it is about their future. And what's important to know that this pathway is a pathway of opportunities. It's a pathway to attract new skills. It's a pathway to attract new industries. It's a pathway to attract new technologies. There's a different way of doing business. So we have businesses with us saying, okay, if we want to reach these goals, these interim goals towards the net zero pathway, what do we have to do? So we had these conversations with them. And really, it's about leadership. It's so important to have pathways and leadership on our pathway to net zero because we cannot do this alone. We need all hands on board. So I really want to take the opportunity to thank each and every one of you. I'm so excited to have launched this, and we'll go a little bit into the details now. And what you all need to know, this pathway is now our mission, where we want to go and where we want to reach in the coming years, going towards net zero by 2050. If we achieve it earlier, that's even better, but at least it's a guidance for all the sectors as well. We're going to be working in the next few months on all the kind of policies, the kind of finance that's needed in all these sectors to be able to achieve. And then, of course, at COP28, we're going to give you updates on where we are, and we feel this is a trend we need to see in so many more countries because we can only do this if we have a plan in our minds. So thank you so much again for being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Now, I hand the stage to His Excellency, Engineer Isa Al-Hashimi, Assistant Undersecretary for the Sustainable Community Sector, and the Acting Assistant Undersecretary for the Green Development and Climate Change Sector at the Ministry of Climate Change and Environment to present a brief overview of the National Net Zero Pathway by 2050.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I would like to thank Her Excellency Mariam bint Mohammed Al Meheri, Minister of Climate Change and Environment, for introducing the UAE's national net zero by 2050 pathway, and allow me to go through this in a bit more details. So in order to understand how we reached here, we first need to go back in time, almost 51 years back. And to be precise, by the time that the UAE was formed in 1971, it's in our DNA that we protect the environment and we capitalize on the benefits that it brings in a way that is sustainable and ensures that the environment can provide the extended ecosystem services for generations to come and fulfill the needs not only for humans but for its own ecosystems. And this is where we build on His Highness the late Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan and his actual principles put in place. Let me take you through a journey of what we have achieved so far. First, we have the UAE submitted its first NDC back in 2015. It focused on renewable energy and it sets the tone and it sets the nation on an emission and on a GHG emission reduction pathway. Later in 2016, we were the first country, the GCC, to ratify the Paris Agreement. And later on in 2020, we have submitted our first economy-wide GHG emission reduction target of 23.5% in comparison to business as usual. Later on in 2021, we were the first nation in the MENA region to commit to net zero by 2050. And building on that, as well as responding to the Glasgow Pact and the call to parties to raise their mitigation ambition. In 2022, we were able to respond to this call and raise our ambition to 31% by 2030 in comparison to business as usual. But in order to achieve this, we need to adopt a whole-of-nation approach, an all-inclusive approach, an approach that leaves no one behind. And with that being said, we are capitalizing on three major advocates. The first advocate is the NDCA. The NDCA is a national gathering that we do on a monthly basis with the private sector, with all relevant stakeholders. And as Her Excellency mentioned, we take their feedback, we take their opinions, and we tailor those into tools that could help us to achieve a win-win situation with the industry, to catalyze on their efforts, on their knowledge, and on their expertise, as well as talent, to achieve our targets. At the end of the day, we need to understand that achieving net zero is not a single entity mandate. It's a mandate that everybody needs to pitch in, and there is no single nation or an entity that could do this. The second part of the advocacy is our national committee, National Net Zero Strategy Committee, which is a committee headed by Her Excellency the Minister, and this is actually an example of dedicated leadership that oversees the implementation of such important subject on the national level. And we have 19 stakeholders with us. I'd like to commend all those 19 entities for their support and for their cooperation in achieving the pathways. And I would like everybody to give them applaud, as I see many of them are here with us. The second part is the fact that when we need to implement this strategy, we need to make sure that this strategy is cohesive and it integrates synergies among policies and strategies that are already set place in the ministry and in the UAE. So this pathway is built on many major milestones and frameworks and toolkits that were developed in many years ago. Starting in 2017, we have the environment policy, which sets up a framework of how we want to deal with different environmental issues and what should we approach in those areas. We are also the first nation to have, in the MENA region, to have a green growth strategy, as well as a circular economy policy. And finally, all those toolkits strategies and policies will feed into developing the UAE's long-term low-emission development strategy. An integral part of this will be the pathway that we are showing today. We are at an advanced stage at setting up this strategy. We started about 6 months ago. We have conducted many assessments, including looking at practices, looking at countries, looking at benchmarks, as well as analyzing every single strategy that was set on the national level and creating for the first time the most recent baseline of GHG emissions that is among their most recent ones globally. We have adopted 2019 as a baseline for our assessment. And during this course, we have culminated into developing the national net zero by 2050 pathway, which we are launching today. And our work will commence in developing the enabling ecosystem, policies, regulations, and programs to achieve this. And of course, we will be very proud to submit our third NDC by Q1 2013 as we set the tone before COP28. More than 30 stakeholders were engaged. We had more than 60 meetings conducted with different stakeholders from different levels. We met analysts on the energy level, all the way to meeting ministers that are relevant to this portfolio, to take feedback and to make sure that this specific pathway is adopted by everybody, and we have stored the culture of belief among many of our stakeholders. As you can see, more than 400 stakeholders were interviewed, and we took their feedback and used this in our pathway. So the pathway is based on 4 principles. The first principle is compliance with the Paris Agreement and the SDG Goal 13, climate action. The second one is built on strengthening our environmental and socio-economical benefits. It also builds on a principle of being climate leadership in both climate leader in both mitigation and adaptation measure. And finally, we need to have a real-world solution, an implementable solution in this pathway. So as we all know and have seen earlier, the pathway adds to our existing NDC target, which is 31%. It adds on that about 18% of reduction by 2030, as well as about 60% by 2040 and achieving net zero by 2050. But we keep on asking or getting questions, what would be the difference in this specific pathway? Is the fact that we are no more projecting against business as usual. We are no more keeping emissions at the level they are. We are pursuing absolute emission reduction, which is adopted by the most developed nations. And to do that, we have adopted the most recent base year target, base year of 2019, and this will set the ambition, the climate change ambition for the upcoming years. And here we would like to show you what does it mean for the sectors, what does it mean for our stakeholders. And I can see many cameras now are being raised and many photos are being taken, but we will sure have this also shared and displayed with our stakeholders and of course our guests. But this means that at the first stage, we are going to focus on the building sector, on the energy efficiency related to that, in order for us to achieve a 25 million metric ton reduction of GHG emissions. And of course, the power and water sector will follow. In 2040, the shift will change. We will focus on the industries, and we will focus on how those industries could become more green and how they produce and how they consume energy and how they use substitute environmentally friendly material. the main mitigation measures that we can see today is building on the just energy transition, using clean and renewable energy sources, including solar, green hydrogen, and clean sources of energy generated from waste management. We will utilize climate-friendly raw material solutions, and we will focus in here specifically on the cement industry that contributes 6% to our GHG emissions. We have already evaluated solutions that could be used in this industry, including using calcined clay as a suitable replacement to the existing clinker. We need to work on reducing the waste generation and treating them in an environmentally friendly way. So just turning waste into energy might not be the full solution that we could realize. We need to use technologies that could support this, including CCUS. Green mobility is a very big component to our strategy, and we are going to focus on promoting electric vehicle usage and promoting green-oriented mobility development strategies. Energy efficiency, of course, it plays a very major role, and it works on the demand side of energy. And we can see that this specific measure is very economically viable, and we will accelerate our efforts in this area. We need to empower the R&D innovation, because we believe that the innovation could bring many benefits forward and help us in achieve this specific strategy, including direct air capture, CCUS, and small to medium reactors. So the benefits that this strategy will bring is shown in here. It will help us in growing the GDP by 3%, which equates to more than 100 billion dirhams. It will create and safeguard jobs. About 200,000 jobs will be created and saved throughout this journey. We will have better air quality, better quality of living because of this, and we will safeguard our community from diseases that are caused by those emissions. And finally, we will have a stronger UAE export program. We will support our industries to become green and to access markets and to export their products. With that being said, I would like to thank everybody for joining us, and I wish you a very pleasant event. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I would like to invite you again, please, to the stage for the Q&A. And I would also ask Engineer Mona Al-Amoudi, Director of Climate Change Department, to come to the stage to open the floor for questions from the audience.
So good afternoon, Dr. Bassem Nasuhi, Fujairah Environmental Authority Advisor and Managing Director of SBS Group. You mentioned that one of the solutions is calcinated clay in order to reduce the CO2 emission for cement industry. So I would like to know more about the methodology and how you will implement this.
Thank you for sharing this question. It's actually the base of using substitute material as a mix to the existing cement raw material, which is clinker. We are in discussions with many cement industries, and we believe that this material could substitute up to 50% of this raw material, and it is extracted from renewable and reusable sources. Of course, it will need technologies to ensure cohesiveness and effectiveness of the substance, and this will require additional R&D in this area, and we look forward for such cooperation.
Thank you very much for sharing your insightful and very ambitious roadmap with us. I would like to ask about, let's say, 2030 and beyond. You've set your target, the reduction will be more than 60% from 2030 moving forward. I'd like to know more about what would be the contribution from carbon capture and storage, as well as the nuclear, as Samar, as you mentioned in there.
I think I will take the first part when it's come to understanding the contribution of the energy sector. So the nuclear, for example, today we're having almost 3 reactor operations. So the 4th one is coming very soon. So within 2020, so before 2024, the 4 reactor will be activated. That's mean we are reducing around 25% of the emissions by then. This is for the nuclear. For the CCUS, as you know, today we already have the deployment of Riyadh projects, which means that we are having 800,000 tons of CO2 capture already from Emirates Steel. The expansion is already in the way because we have already ADNOC expansion CCUS plans, and that is, I think, 2 already plans already having deployments started, and more to come. So the target is to scale out that by almost 4x by 2030. Beyond that, we're still analyzing the potential, being that we're exploring the industries that would be able to adapt to the CCUS. Through our expansion and the, let's say, discussions with different stakeholders, we came to know that certain industry exploring the options beyond the oil and gas. So that's mean, for example, the aluminum and the cement. But the viability of the technology as we speak today maybe need to be altered in the way that will be adjusted to their process. So that to be part of our R&D and the growth that we are looking for, or the innovation part that we're looking for our journey up to 2050.
To put this in numbers perspective, we plan to have CCUS contributes reduction of 40 million metric tons by 2040. And in addition, it will be supported by natural-based solutions. Planting 100 million mangroves should enable us to sequester another 2.6 million tons of CO2 in 2040.
Thank you very much for a very insightful presentation. My name is Olga, and I'm representing private sector, DNV, Risk Management and Assurance. We're working with many stakeholders, and especially industries that are hard to abate, transportation, aluminium, steel. And I would like specifically to understand how the Scope 3 emissions are to be reflected in your national determination strategy, and how supply chain management would be addressed. Thank you very much.
I think in the discussions that we had, or the presentation that we have, more or less the long-term strategies are looking at Scope 1. Yani being the best practices, you start with the Scope 1, and then you expand to Scope 2, which is already part of our journey. When it's come to the Scope 3, it's an influence of what you are doing in the industry, because they are the one who's providing you with the raw material. We do understand that the UAE is exporting a lot of the material outside, but this journey has been commenced by different nations. So we're trying to basically have that kind of understanding of the impact on the value chain. So we're starting with the Scope 1 as a focus for the strategy, and the 2, because the 2 will be more about the energy. So if you're greening your grid already with the shift that you're going to have and the transition from the fossil-based to the renewable sources, including solar and nuclear, that part will be covered. When it's come to the raw material, I think His Excellency brought out the point about replacement of the green, or providing better environmentally friendly substitutions, and that includes this construction material, for example. So from there, this is part of the Scope 3. We talk about the embedded carbon in these material and the products, and how these products can be green. But as a quantification of today is not done.
We are focusing on Scope 1 and 2, as Mona mentioned, and we keep on receiving questions around food systems. How can you incorporate food systems in your NDC? And when you look at nation that imports a lot of its food, it becomes really difficult to account for scope 3 in our emissions reporting. So what we are trying to use is the fact that whatever goes in our territory or jurisdiction area is what is counted for. So for example, in this case, food waste or food systems translate for us into how we can reduce our waste, which is incorporated in here, as well as how we can make or use circular economy to reuse those material. So we are focusing on scope 1 and 2.
Hello, my name is Benjamin. I'm a student at NYU Abu Dhabi. Thank you so much for sharing this strategy. It's really inspiring and great work to the entire ministry team. I worked on the decarbonization strategy for my university, and I know one of the challenges that stakeholders face is being able to procure renewable energy capacity because currently certain regulation limits this ability of entities that do not maybe want to have their own capacity rather than purchasing power from the grid. So what do you foresee any changes of regulation of the electricity market?
Of course, I think the energy sector will definitely be more agile. We are actually seeing a regulation being passed now through the cabinet and through the Federal Council in the UAE to enable use of solar energy among different entities. But we also need to understand that renewables are usually not a base load source of energy. So we need to find ways into how we can deal with them. And this is what is addressed through the strategy, using those industrial batteries to enable storing energy and then reusing them. But of course, this specific decarbonization plan will enable and empower stakeholders to generate their own energy within their own premises.
Thanks for the information. I just would like to mention in SBS Group, we have already a comprehensive solution for reducing CO2 for cement industry. It's mainly about 47% of CO2 reduction, including about 7 steps, and it has been implemented in a country near to UAE. Particularly for waste heat recovery, RDF and biomass, it will reduce by 47%, in addition to calcinated clay, and before that, the operational excellence and other 6 steps. So I would like to meet you to present the roadmap, which you already confirmed and with a track record to be implemented in UAE as well.
Sure, thank you. We would love to see you.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, my name is Fatouh. I'm from Kuwait. I'm from the Kuwait Institute for Scientific Research, but I'm here representing the Association of Energy Engineers. I'm currently the president for that association. So I'm very impressed with the pathway, and I hope we follow suit in Kuwait. But I wanted to ask about the capacity development and talent. And how, I mean, I'm sure that you've been investing a lot in developing the capacity internally and certifying your engineers, but I did not see it as one of the highlighted points. And I think it's very important to address it and put it there as part of your pathway. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is well spotted and well noted. I think what we are projecting today is a significant milestone to our strategy. The strategy will definitely address talent and knowledge gaps and capacity building programs.
Hello, my name is Alida Pavlovic. I'm an environmental, legal and policy expert based in UAE last 5 years. All these policies and plans are amazing. I'm really forward looking to how will this end up. But I want to ask you something about your plans on developing and strengthening legal framework, legislation, maybe even amending of the constitution that should address properly all these ambitions and protections. Thank you.
So actually, just 2 days ago, we had a meeting with the National Committee. We were discussing options, policy mix options. And in that area, we are going to discuss things that should be legally binded, things that need incentivize and incentivizing the private sector, and things that will need acceleration of efforts and enablement to do such things, such as, for example, energy efficiency. It has a net positive case. but we need to accelerate our efforts in this area, encouraging people to do more and having the right product in the market for people to adopt such mechanism. Thank you.
Thank you very much and for the good presentation. And I really want to say congratulations to the government of the United Arab Emirates for being the first nation to launch this net zero initiative. So I have one question. What are the major challenges that to tackle the net zero? You know, there will be challenges. And how are you going to overcome all these challenges? Thank you.
Thank you. There will be many challenges because implementation of this regulation this pathway requires a whole of nation effort. It requires the right governance model, and it will require embedding the principles of GHG mitigation measures within different areas. So we need to have the right governance framework, which would enable us to achieve this. We also have a challenge around finance and making the right time to intervene when it would make the most sense for the nation, not necessarily financially, but economically. And of course, we need to accelerate our efforts. That's a challenge on its own because we need to increase our efforts in those areas and to work tirelessly on this specific strategy. Do you like to add something?
I think what's brought as a point from His Excellency when it's come to discussing the commercially viable technologies, because on this kind of pathway that we are having is the reduction are not small. So we are not looking for piloting only. It's large scale deployment of these technology. So within that, you need to really think of the commercialization of it. Is the business going to be affected? So they need to do advanced planning. They need to have a full understanding of deployment of such technologies. So what kind of environmental, let's say climate-related alterations that will be required in certain technologies, because most of the technology providers are coming from the other side of the world. So how that will be adapted in the climate of the UAE is totally different story. So that understanding need to be there, but the commence of these kind of deployments is already there in the UAE. But just to accelerate the pace and having a full understanding of the opportunity so we can understand the potential reduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, and thank you, Engineer Mona. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your active participation. But unfortunately, our event has come to an end. We look forward to your contribution to the National Net Zero by 2050 pathway. Thank you and goodbye.